And so I was looking for like a nut-free spread that tasted really good and left me feeling really good. And the only thing that I could find was like that Trader Joe's cookie butter. And so I was like, I kind of want to, make something that's similar taste-wise, but has a better nutritional profile. And then it just dawned on me, granola butter. Why has no one ever done that before?
And so here we had this dilemma, this fact.
I've been almost a decade researching this subject.
Every aspect of your metabolic health improves.
From the Hint offices in San Francisco, I'm Kara Goldin, founder and CEO of Hint. You may have tried Hint water before, but this is my podcast. Each week, we talk to some of the most creative entrepreneurs, from world-touring pop stars like Jay Sean to the people behind favorite Instagram accounts, including So Yummy, New York City, and even YouTubers like Sarah Dietschy. So the million-dollar question, what does it really take to be unstoppable? Let's find out. Hi, everybody. It's Kara at Unstoppable, and we're so excited this morning to have Allie Bonar here from Kween Granola Bar. Thanks for coming over.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so Allie just had her first show at the Fancy Food Show here in San Francisco, and we're really excited to hear what she thought about that. But first, welcome, first of all. But I want to get some background on you. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in San Diego. I was actually born in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Randomly, my mom was a Navy dentist, but then we moved to San Diego shortly after that. And then I came up to the Bay for school and studied nutrition at UC Berkeley and kind of stuck around San Francisco for a couple years after that. And now I'm back down in San Diego where I'm working on granola butter full time.
That's awesome. So Solano Beach. And how is that like in building a company down there?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's definitely a lot slower paced than San Francisco. People are it's more work-life balance, I would say. And I really miss kind of like the buzz of San Francisco, just like people are just up to bigger things up here kind of, starting their own companies and stuff. But it has been really awesome just to have that kind of relaxation side of things when like the rest of my life is in shambles.
And the beach that you can actually go to and lay out.
Yeah.
And sun on a gloomy San Francisco day that we're experiencing. Absolutely. So what gave you the idea to actually start this granola butter company?
Yeah. So when I was studying nutrition at Cal, I've always loved food. And like even in third grade, my mom said I would get up before everyone else and like make sandwiches for everyone. Like I just loved like playing with food, making food. And so it's kind of felt like a natural progression for me to just study nutrition. And unfortunately, kind of developed an eating disorder in college while, just learning all of this nutrition information. And it was kind of just information overload, like I knew too much about nutrition. And so, coming all through my college experience, every time I would take a bite of something, like I knew all the nutrition about it. And food became really stressful for me and kind of lost along the way, like the pleasure and joy of eating. And so, a few years out of college, I'm kind of still struggling with this. And so as in my recovery, I started to incorporate a lot more nuts and nut butters into my diet, which was something I had restricted for a long time. And, delicious as they are, it was kind of digestively a lot to handle, especially I was working out a lot and just kind of sat really heavy in my stomach. And so I was looking for like a nut-free spread that tasted really good and left me feeling really good. And the only thing that I could find was like that Trader Joe's cookie butter, which is obviously nutritionally like not the best.
Tons of sugar
But I mean, tastes amazing. And so I was like, I kind of want to, make something that's similar taste-wise, but has a better nutritional profile. And then it just dawned on me, granola butter. Why has no one ever done that before? So I Googled it on my phone and nothing really came up. And so kind of sat on the idea for a while. And my boyfriend of 5 years, he's kind of in the tech consulting business, and we kind of realized that both of us would be great business partners. And so we decided to go in together. And so granola butter was born. So it's, to tell you a little bit about it, the first ever spreadable granola. So it's actually nut-free. It has the texture of an almond butter. Use it the same way, drip it on smoothies, spread it on toast. Tastes kind of like cinnamon Teddy Grahams, if you remember those.
Yeah. Well, it has maple, right? And maple, a little bit of maple syrup in it. And that's great. So I'm reading the, with my glasses on right now. So gluten-free oats, flax, olive oil, coconut oil, maple syrup, salt, and spices. So a little bit, is there cinnamon in here too or no?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we do like a pretty warming spice blend. So yeah, cinnamon. And we keep the sugar low. It's only 3 grams.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
it's been super exciting. So we initially launched actually kind of to more like the millennial market, just like people wanting a fun new spread. But I realized like all the schools now are nut free, and I don't have kids, so I, didn't really know that before. But all these moms were coming to us and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing," because I couldn't send my kids to school with a PB&J and like sunflower seed butter. I like it, but I think for a lot of kids, it could be a little bit bitter, sun butter. And so all these moms are obsessed with granola butter. So we're kind of, now we're top 8 free and nut free. So going
that's
that way.
amazing.
Yeah.
So so did you always know when you were at Berkeley? Did you know like you wanted to be an entrepreneur and go start a company, or what were you? I speak a lot on college campuses, and I'm always like talking to students about, like they're like, should I know now that I'm, that if I want to go be an entrepreneur, like, is there something wrong with me if I don't know now? Like, how were you feeling back then when you were?
Yeah, totally. So I always was very head down on being pre-med. And I think, being a doctor, and I think it was really just due to like an underlying fear of not really knowing what I wanted to do. And it was like this set out plan, it was like, okay, perfect. Like my senior year, like then I'll have a next step and then I'll have a next step. And it was just this trajectory that was already laid out for me. And, but then I had this kind of quarter life crisis. I remember I was like doing some volunteer work in the hospital, and it just hit me. I was like, I hate blood. I hate sick people. Why am I?
Why are you doing that? Why are you focused on that as like a life decision?
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
And like I had 8 years of schooling ahead of me, if I were to choose that path. So luckily didn't pursue that. Tons of respect for anyone who, decides to be a doctor. It's very important, but was not for me. And so kind of then did the cliche SF tech thing. And so went in and worked for a health tech company, which was still kind of, in my wheelhouse because I wanted to make a difference in some way at the end of the day. And so worked for this awesome health tech company, and then was there about 3 years and really started to kind of just miss nutrition again and miss working with food. And at that point, my relationship with food hadn't really healed, and I just felt like more stable and was able to really kind of surround myself with it again. And so that's when I launched Avo Queen, which is kind of my like personal brand, if you will, Instagram account, just chronicling like self-love and body image and just all the everyday things. And so, yeah. And then, I never thought I would start my own food company. Like that's crazy, but it has been so fun and so rewarding. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And how much do you think, like, are they just finding you on like Instagram? And then, do you feel like there's a connection between the fact like those people who are finding you first on Instagram and liking you and knowing your story, and then they're going and looking for your product?
Yeah. So it's been kind of interesting because I would love to hear your take too.
Yeah.
In terms of like separating a personal brand and, your baby. And so obviously I started with Avo Queen, but then I wanted to launch Queen & Co., which is just our brand Instagram on the side, because I wanted to separate them. And I didn't want my followers who had followed like my personal journey from the start to kind of be like bombarded with just like product information all the time. Because that's not really why they came, and they were kind of there more for like the self-love aspect, and I wanted to respect that. And so, but it has been hard now that, my life is Queen & Co. and like that is what I do all day. So trying to kind of differentiate, like how do you, I don't know, differentiate that?
So 14 years ago when we were starting Hint, frankly, social was not there. It was like, it was starting, to become, there were like, I don't know. I used to work for AOL. I would say like AOL, like chat rooms were probably like the closest thing. Right. And so, this was pre-Facebook. And so there wasn't even, that. Right. And so I felt like, over time, having come from a tech background, I was always super interested and sort of like, new ways of communicating with people and the customers. I mean, it sort of goes back to, I always laugh because when I'm out speaking about sort of building this brand, my husband is our chief operating officer, and people are always like, I mean, every time I'm out, like, what's it like working with your husband? And I'm like, listen, it's actually easier. Like, I have 4 kids. And so building a brand and like my priorities are, and as your life gets bigger and more complicated, it's like, I always say this, like, you have to like put stakes in the ground around what's important, and you have to learn to say no. And I've never been like really good at saying no. And so I figured out like my family is really important to me, and building Hint is really important to me. So I don't have very many friends anymore. And so I feel like for me, social media is how I keep up with people. And then like I'll float in and see them like, once a year or whatever. And then we pick up exactly where we were so I'm like, I really see the good side of social media versus like, how people talk about like, oh, I'm off social media for like months and months. And I'm like, oh, hope you come back soon. Cause I'd like really like to see what you're doing. And I miss you like on, on sort of a weird level. But because I was like, really using it in that way, trying to communicate, people were always like, oh gosh, I just saw you, they knew I was starting Hint, but they were like, oh gosh, I just saw you in, Fresh Market in the South. Like, that's really cool. We know you live in San Francisco. And so I decided to, kind of integrate what I was doing from a business standpoint into my personal life and really start to talk about like, okay, I'm on the plane now going to, Alabama, like, wish me luck. Like, we're talking to Auburn University about getting our product into, their campus. And then people were like, oh, what happened? And so then I started to really naturally, really organically have this dialogue with what was going on. And then like, I thought, well, there's a lot more to that conversation that probably wouldn't be appropriate on like a Facebook. And then I just decided that I was already on LinkedIn, and I thought, well, maybe I should really start writing about like the challenges of launching a brand in college campuses that for our category, like, Coke and Pepsi own all the rights. And like, I had no idea. And people really started reacting like, gosh, I had no idea too. And what was fascinating to me is like a lot of the people that did react were potential consumers. They weren't necessarily people in the food and beverage industry. And so I really started to build this audience of people saying like, gosh, you're really teaching me something, like that they didn't necessarily invest in my product other than the fact that they would potentially buy, and they were doing totally different things outside, but they just thought it was like, they want to learn, right? And so then I just thought if I can actually like really start to write and build on things that I'm seeing, then, that's how I'm going to build my social media brand. But then there came a point where I felt like there's some stuff I want to talk about that is like kind of heavy, like that could be like lobbying and policy stuff, for example, that really doesn't have a place, in the Hint, like, marketing messaging and halo. And so then I just decided, well, what if I just say like, it's from me? It's stuff that I'm seeing out there that I find is really challenging, or like, I can talk about like in my day-to-day life too, like while I'm trying to run a company, how, I had these young babies and how, people were talking about like lean in and balance and everything. And I'm like, screw that. Like, my baby has croup and kept me up all night, and like, I don't have any childcare, and it's like, it's really hard. Right. Like, and so again, like, I think like if you can actually really be your authentic self and generally be positive, but every once in a while show that like, life doesn't always like, it's not perfect. And so I've always been, one to sort of, pick up on things like the lean in thing. Like while I like, read the book and maybe went to one luncheon like that was around there, I always said like, that's not really my life. Like that like I try to, jump in. But for me, it's like, it depends on the day. Like, I've got a family and I've got a commitment to them to sort of like be their mother and grow up. And, at the end of the day, when they're sick, like it rocks my world. right? And now it gets easier now that they're teenagers. They like actually don't need, well, they need me in different ways, right? Than they needed me there. So I think that it really was organic. I didn't sit there and say from a, strategy standpoint, okay, let's build the Hint brand and let's build the Cara brand. But then I also started to see that I became, I would talk about these real life things. And then people, as I was out like speaking at college universities, people would be like, oh, I read what you said on LinkedIn about this. And like, what do you think about this? And I realized that in people's minds, they are tied. Like I'm still, the founder and the CEO and, also run this company and also have this family. So I thought like from an SEO standpoint too, that we have to be able to tie those things together because sometimes people will remember like, oh, there's that Hint product and there's a woman that runs that company and she writes a lot on LinkedIn, but I can't remember her name. Like that's the way I live, or like, oh, she's like wrote about this thing and I think she's a founder of a company in San Francisco, but I don't really remember what the name of the company is. And then, so you have to be able to like, I think it works best if you can tie all of those elements together that people will ultimately, remember about you. So I think it's like, when I hear private equity firms, talk about that brands and, that shouldn't have a story, like they fear like founder stories. I mean, and I've heard this from lots of entrepreneurs that they're like, oh, my investors don't really want me to talk. I mean, you're pre-investor, right? Like you don't have these people, but that's sort of like, one guy's opinion that you shouldn't be able to be talking about sort of what you're like, how you built the story. Like I really, really believe that, people buy brands today from, individuals that they like. Right? Like, and when you don't have brand stories, then it's like you can definitely get an audience and get sales, but you just have to like buy a lot of billboards and have really great advertising that's punchy in order to do it. So I think it's like, people want to write the publications, people want to write about founder stories too. And they want, so I think like you can get more bang for your buck. Especially early on, but I think that that's really important. So, but anyway, so going back to you on, the granola butter. I mean, it's such a great idea. It's awesome. And you were telling me earlier that you just got into pressed juicery as well. So, and you can put it on in a bunch of pressed juiceries. If you guys aren't familiar with them, they have a yogurt, not in all of them, but they have a frozen yogurt and you can actually put the granola butter on there too. So that's a great partnership. So
that was really exciting. I mean, that was our first real, big account. And it's just interesting because coming from the tech side of things, not knowing how kind of slow food moves, like you're learning.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome to really finally see it come to fruition because it was about like 9 months in the making of like when we started talking to them to when it was on shelves or in stores.
Did they just reach out to you or did you actually?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually had sent them samples right when we launched in March for their editorial side for Chalkboard magazine, that kind of line. And I think the founder, Hayden, had like walked by and seen it on someone's desk or something and tried it and was like, we need this on our freeze.
That's awesome.
So I had gotten, I've been reached out to by them. But I feel like stuff like that happens all the time where it's like you're trying, when you're reaching out and trying so hard, sometimes other things just seem to fall in your lap. Seemingly, I mean, we're definitely grinding really hard, but
yeah.
And that's actually something that it reminded me is like, speaking about social media and, showing both sides of things, I think you do a really great job of showing the good and the bad. And that's something in 2019, I really want to do from a business side, because I think being an entrepreneur, especially in like natural food and everything is so glamorized on social media. And, it's really easy to just show like your wins, right? So posting, oh, we're a new topic request and not showing like the 9 months it took to get there and, a machine that was supposed to help us
broke.
Yeah. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. So I'm really trying in the next year to kind of show the downfalls as well. And just like those moments of hardship where it's like, okay, this is really tough and, self-doubt and all that. But to that point, like, it's also so rewarding. So
Yeah.
showing both. Yeah.
And it's important. I mean, I would say the one that I'm definitely doing Instagram and Facebook and some of the others, but about a year ago, I got really into Twitter. I used to be that CEO who'd say like, I don't understand Twitter. And then I was like, I'm always this person. If I actually articulate that I don't understand something, I've like my entire life, whether it was, in athletics or in academics or whatever, like I've always said, like, that's not okay for me to say I don't understand something. So I really need to like dive in and understand it. So for me, Twitter was that. And I wanted to like come up with a conclusion that I either liked it or I didn't like it. And I love it. And on like a lot of levels. And so really like that is the place where I find, I miss my flight and who else has done this? And like, people are like, oh God, yeah, I've totally done that before. And, and things that I say to myself, like, I mean, I was literally on Friday night at Newark Airport sitting at a gate across from the other gate. And I was so tired and I was just like staring and I looked at the screen and it said Seattle, but I was like, in my mind, it was San Francisco. It was the exact same flight times. And I just totally missed it. And then suddenly I hear all these people around me talking about Seattle. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like everyone's talking about Seattle at the San Francisco gate. Like I wonder what's going on. And then all of a sudden I look up at the sign and I missed it it was like the last flight of the day and I missed it. And so then, I talk on Twitter and I'm like, I am such a dumbass and the flight is gone. And like the United people were just laughing at me and it really wasn't funny at all. And I was just like, but I'm like, what do you do? Like, you just have to like, I went back to the city and went back to my place and I just like went to bed and then got up early the next morning. I'm like, it's life, and it's like, you can get upset or you can just say, wow, that will never happen to me again. Cause that was like so pathetic. And
make you feel better. That exact thing has happened to my mom and I. She was visiting me, at college and we were at the airport. We were actually in Oakland and we were at, I think it was Pyramid Brewery and we were like having beers together and that's when we missed it, which was even worse because we were like, we're so irresponsible.
I know. So I probably did it in college, but I fly a lot and I was just like, but I really chalked it up to, I mean, it was crazy. And then, other things like I had oral surgery last week at the last minute. I cracked a tooth over New Year's. And anyway, I ended up being in New York and having oral surgery. And so I was like joking with my cousin who's a dentist. And I was like, I'm going to film you because I didn't really think it was that bad. And then all of a sudden, as I'm filming, he was like, oh no, like, you're like, you need a root canal, you need all this. And I'm like, really? No, I don't really need it. And so, but in a strange way, again, it's like, okay, I got to run out of here right now to go to a meeting, with somebody about Hint right now. And cause I didn't want to miss that meeting. Cause it was like, I only had a few days in New York and my time there is very, very scheduled. And so again, like showing people that, you get back up, you're tired, you just keep going. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm really tired. I'm out for like 48 hours. Adios. And people like that kind of communication. They feel like they're following me. And then I'll I ran into somebody in the Belize airport where I was over like the holidays. And I don't even know, Kimmy, if I told you this whole thing. Kimmy is from our team. She's in the room too. But anyway, they were like, oh my God, do you work for Hint? And I was laughing because I was like, oh, how can you tell? My suitcase says Hint on it. All my kids have Hint swag on and they start laughing and they're like, oh, I totally follow you on social media and I drink Hint all the time. And now you're in Belize City and you're like, and I said with no makeup on and my hair on top of my head, and they were like, no, but you, and I said, what do you like about what I talk about? And they said, because you're really real. Like you talk about like how hard it is to start companies. And I was like, are you an entrepreneur? And they're like, no, but I've thought about being an entrepreneur. And I think like there's so many people that glamorize it. And you're just like, I love what I do every single day, but it's freaking hard, you know, and you have the rest of your life and that you're dealing with. And so anyway, I think like that's a big aspect. The more people can, and it sounds like you've done a lot of that already. I mean, I've seen some of what you've done, but I mean, over the years, like, I think it's also like never be afraid. You don't know when people enter the room too. So never be afraid to sort of like backtrack a tiny bit and sort of like recap. Right? Like, because I think that's another issue where, you know, it's like, you know, I'm sort of like assuming every day that people sort of understand where we are from like a policy standpoint, or like on, like we don't produce our product in cans because it has BPA. And there's so many people, like depending on where they entered, you know, the room, right, that they just don't know like what our opinion is on it. And so like, don't be afraid to go back.
That's something that I need to always remind myself, because you always are in this mindset of I need to produce fresh content, right? And I think now, especially going into the, you know, the next year, it's like I have less time to be creating content, and more not recycling it, but repackaging it. And,
totally.
And especially with like, you know, blog posts, like those take so long, and so pushing out like older blog posts or old recipes that I've done. No, that's such a good point, because I always in my mind I'm like, oh,
I've already done that.
Like, yeah. But also even the people that have followed you, like maybe they didn't see it that day, or, you know, so you never know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it's just, it's funny. And it's funny, like too, when I'm out speaking, I get reminded about things that people like think are really interesting. Like our first copacker. Well, people were asking, I was speaking at Harvard Business School last week in New York, and people were asking me, you know, how I figured out how to do a product that was shelf stable without preservatives. And I mean, my feelings about like the food and beverage industry early on when I was first starting out, I was like, you know, knocking on everybody's doors. I wasn't afraid to like talk to people. I felt like in tech that's kind of accepted. They don't necessarily give you like, you know, the rule book, but they'll point you in the direction to go talk to that person. And in food and beverage, I just couldn't find those people, and basically just decided, like, I tried really hard, and it was really upsetting to me because I just thought, like, just because I hadn't worked for Coke or Kraft, like everybody was discounting the fact that I could actually go do this. And I'm like, I built $1 billion brand for, you know, a major internet company. Like, I can actually go do this. But, you know, it really, when you're surrounded by people who give you so much self-doubt, like that are like doubting you too. And I mean, literally at the fancy food show, I'll never forget like a beverage company that was, you know, they were probably a $50 million beverage company, but they, you know, they weren't like $1 billion beverage company. I remember saying, oh God, I like so admire like what you guys have done. And they were like, can you move away from the booth? Because we really reserve our booth for like buyers. And I remember being like, how rude. Like, you know, here I've like shown like, you know, authentic like compliments of like the brand and sort of how they've built it. And like, basically they're like, get lost. And this was just not like a person running the booth. This was a major executive of that company that I was just like, whoa, like that was like so crazy. And I never really heard that in tech. So I ended up going down one of the aisles at Whole Foods and seeing like, not even like searching for this, but one day like saw a bunch of apple juice that was like sort of the pressed apple juice on the shelf. And I just like happened to pick up the apple juice, and I thought, well, this stays on the shelf more than like a few weeks. And how do they use preservatives? And then this company was based in Watsonville. And I thought, oh, Watsonville, California, like I kind of heard of it. Maybe I've passed it. And then I looked it up, and it was right by Santa Cruz. And then I thought, well, maybe I could just call this guy. I mean, what do I have to lose? Like, I've just been told by the guy at the booth at Fancy Food Show to like get lost, right? And so I called him up on the phone, and really nice, like salt of the earth guy. And he was like an apple farmer. And I just said like, listen, I was just curious. Is your product shelf stable and you don't use preservatives? And he's like, no. And I'm like, how do you do it? And he's like, we heat the product. And so it's like a pseudo pasteurization process. And I'm like, great, I live in San Francisco. Can I come down? And he's like, sure. Like the only time I have available is at 2 a.m. And I'm like, 2 a.m.? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, 2 a.m. And so I was like, okay. And I guess I'll come down. And he had all these reasons. Like he goes out and picks the apples in the morning and he had all this, like the lines were running. So I was like, okay. And so I looked at my husband and he was, thought this was a crazy idea. And then I was like, this is going to be even crazier that we're going down to like these fields, like at 2 a.m. And, and again, like I'd run a pretty significant business and, it was not like going to places at 2 a.m., but I was like, somebody will actually talk to me and have a conversation with me to help me like figure out this puzzle that I'm trying to solve. And so my husband went with me and like we literally like put our like camping cots in the car because we were like, what if we're like, we felt like these other co-packers that we had talked to, oftentimes you're sitting around and waiting. And I'm like, maybe I'll just like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to sit in a chair and like fall asleep, but maybe I'll just sit there and wait for him. And so when we got there, it was so interesting because we were asking him all these questions and he was like, have you worked at, Coke or Kraft or whatever? I'm like, no, I'm like a tech executive, but I'm just like trying to figure all this stuff out. And he's like, I really admire that. And, it's like what I figured out is like, there's not a lot of those people, but there's some people out there. And when you find them, you show them that you've got grit and that you're curious and like that you're willing to like work hard. So anyway, like, I think like that story, I like haven't told in a few years. And I told it at HBS. And these people were all like, whoa, like you could just see the room be like, oh my God. And I'm like, sorry, HBS, but nobody teaches you that. Mm-hmm. Like in undergrad school and business school, like you have to like be humble and you have to like, you don't show up to an Apple co-packer in your suit, mm-hmm. right? Like you have to be able to like sit there and be on his time and his schedule because he's doing you a favor. Yeah. And ultimately, 14 years later, he's still like somebody that when we're trying to figure out hard problems, we call him and we're like, hey, like, what do you think about this? If we want to do small batch runs of our product, like we'll take it down to him. And he like understands that we need higher speeds for our product. So we can't like really run on his, plant because it's a lot slower, but he taught us so much. And I think like when you find, again, like that sort of stuff along the way, I think is like really important to entrepreneurs to be able to like, there's no rule book where you're going to find the answers to this stuff. You have to just keep digging. And anyway,
yeah.
But so
I love that. My mom is very similar, like almost that pit bull mentality.
Yeah.
Like I remember, growing up, she always would ask like insane questions. And I was so in my like teenage angsty phase and I was so embarrassed. And I remember one time we were at the Rolling Stones concert in Chicago. And we'd like flown out there as like a girls' trip. Fun. And she loves the Stones. And I thought we had awesome seats, but she was like, I want to get down to the pit. And she's a dentist in San Diego. And so she starts talking to the guy who works the lights. And she was like, is there any way like I can trade you dental work in San Diego for like pit wristbands? And these are like $2,000. Oh
my God.
Wristbands.
That's hilarious.
And in my mind, I'm like, Mom, what are you kidding
me? Why?
And of course he goes, oh my God, I'm moving to San Diego. I need a dentist. He's like, let me see what I can do. Comes back with 2 pit wristbands. Yeah. We were like 10 feet away from Mick Jagger the whole night.
Oh my God.
Like, something clicked in my mind that night.
Yeah.
As like a 15-year-old, like angsty teen. And I was like, okay, you just need to ask.
Yeah. And throw it out there. Yeah. I think that's so right. And, and you'll get a lot of no's. And if you're, trying to be an entrepreneur and you can't really handle no, then like being an entrepreneur probably isn't for you because you will. But if you're like really, really focused on, making it happen and solving a problem, then, you're just going to figure it out like in any ways. Entrepreneurs ask me all the time, like, is there a book written about this stuff? Is there a certain consultant I should hire in order to like go and figure out how to develop the product? And, I don't think there's any right way. I don't think there's any perfect consultant that's going to go solve the problem. And I always tell people like, the interesting thing is, first of all, even if you have all the money in the world to go and help you do that, yes, it might help you get there faster, but you should really understand how to do things because like, that's when you really run into problems. When you're a, founder or CEO that just doesn't really understand how you actually create these things, like that's when you really run into trouble, especially if, you have challenges with your ingredients or whatever, or like, there's, God forbid, a recall or whatever, like you have to be able to really understand the processes. I think you never, can sort of rest and say, oh, that's someone else's job in your company, even when you get to be, 140 people like us. And, like, I think you have to just always like sort of touch on things like as you start to scale the company. So how did you develop this product? Everybody's always asking, like, how do you actually get it to product? Like, how long did it take you guys to do it?
Yeah. Oh my God. So the first like iterations were obviously just in my kitchen with like a Vitamix blender and they were terrible probably. And then we brought on Ari, who is our third co-founder. So we met him, my boyfriend Eric who's also my co-founder, went to Jewish summer camp with him growing up. So they were like,
awesome.
all like strong relationships are made. And so he worked at Nomad in New York and some like Michelin star restaurants. And so it was really kind of,
so we had like the culinary kind of urge. Yeah.
So he was like in the fine dining space, knew nothing about wellness. So it's actually really fascinating to kind of hear his take on wellness. He's like, oh, bone broth, like those are just the scraps, like the bones that we throw in a pot, like they're charging how much for that?
Yeah,
like,
it's crazy. I agree with them.
Yeah, And like kimchi, he's like, So we brought him on and he just really like refined the process and, gave us kind of that culinary know-how and added the depth of knowledge with like the spice blend and everything and just took it to the next level. So right now, we're working out of a commercial kitchen down in San Diego and we still produce everything ourselves. So obviously, we're starting to look at scaling and co-packers and whatnot, but at the moment it's been really awesome to like self-produce and be able to iterate really quickly and, do new flavors. And we're launching a chocolate flavor next month. So
super fun
just to, we can easily tweak. Oh, we need a little more cacao, a little more of this. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now.
And what were your first stores?
First stores were Rainbow Grocery in SF. And then Napa Farms Market, Terminal 2.
I love those guys. Yeah, they're awesome. Amazing.
And it was so fun at Fancy Foods this weekend to actually meet the buyers in person. Like, when you're just communicating with someone over email and you like build them up in your mind as a small brand. You're like, because they just have so much power. And you meet them in real life and like, obviously they're cool people, but you're like, oh, they put their pants on the same way as like everyone else.
Yeah, totally.
It's awesome. So those were our first stores and, some smaller independent naturals up in the Bay Area. But and then Erewhon in LA was actually pretty, like one of our first stores as well.
That's awesome. Have you guys done online, like how big is that for you guys? Like, is it what percent of the overall net?
Yeah, it's about a third for.
That's great. Yeah.
Online is a third, retail and then food service now with Pressed. And so we really started online, just obviously on Instagram and that's always going to be my favorite just because it's so fun. You can immediately interact with the customer. We even when we were just launching, we had kind of done an Instagram poll because we were thinking about maybe changing our name. And it was just fun because it was like, granola butter won by like a landslide. It was like 99%. And it was so cool to just have that customer interaction. And then also they feel invested, like they're helping build the brand.
Yep.
So I don't know if you guys have done anything like that, but it was really cool to do it that way. But the thing with online is it's so volatile. Like we'll launch a new flavor, and then things spike. And then it's nice to have the retail and the food service to kind of even it out.
Totally.
Sales wise. So I think just doing a combo of all three. And right now we're so new. We're kind of just seeing what sticks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. I always tell entrepreneurs too, that for me, I've seen brands go away, over the years. And I think the one consistent thread, no matter what category in the food and beverage, is if you have all your eggs in one basket, whether it's Target or whether it's Whole Foods or, it's, as somebody said to me early on when I was starting Hint, that, his biggest advice, he had this guy, Josh Dorff, who had founded a company called Stoneburr Flowers. He's like, you'll eventually get into Whole Foods nationwide. You'll all these great wins, but don't rest. And I was like, what do you mean? That's super cool if you get into Whole Foods nationwide. And he's like, you'll get there. But the most important thing is if they have so much of your business, then you're at risk. So he's like always be figuring out how to diversify. And that's the thing that I see about online is that, I mean, we deal with Amazon, but then we also have our own direct business. And so it's like, and then we have Target and Whole Foods and, you know, lots of other things. And no percentage of our business is like greater than 10%. And so I think like that's the thing, like should be everyone's goal, no matter what size. It's like, and that may not be able to happen tomorrow, but like that's like that should be a strategic goal for, you know, any entrepreneur starting, you know, no matter what size you are, is if you see that there's too much weight, doesn't mean like, you know, you change it tomorrow, but your goal is to actually shift it in some way so that you grow businesses or distribution points along the way that really, you know, help you diversify and actually, you know, create less risk in your company. Because if, you know, I know for a fact that there were entrepreneurs when the acquisition of Whole Foods happened, like, you know, Amazon came in and they really started to look at the data and there were, you know, different, I mean, it was all over the map who like survived in that whole thing. And so if you like have 80% of your business in Whole Foods, like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so if you were kicked out of there, then, you know, I would hear like Sprouts would like look at that and like wonder if they were actually looking at it correctly. And, you know, some buyers would say, oh gosh, like people can't buy it at Whole Foods now, but now they can go buy it at Sprouts. Or then just depending on what side of the bed the buyer woke up on, they could say, oh, they've been kicked out of, you know, Whole Foods, so they're not going to be able to survive. So we should kick them out too. And I mean, it was like amazing. It was really had a huge impact, I think, on the industry. And so the more that you can say like, they're a really important customer of mine, but you know, we have the rest of our business, 90% of our business is in lots of other pockets. I think it's like super important. So
absolutely. That's great advice.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge. So, so beyond the butter, I mean, can you talk to us about like, what else do you see? What's 2019 going to be all about? You're testing lots of different things, as you said.
Yeah, testing lots of things. We're going to be also launching single serving packets.
Great idea.
Around March. So kind of like those like Justin sweet packets.
I love them.
And we found actually we have a big like cycling ultra marathoners community, which I never realized, but just they're really excited for the packets because like I think I've never done an ultra marathon, but I guess, you know, the nut butters are hard to digest. And so it's like nice because ours is a little higher in carbs for someone who's like super active. But yeah, I think the single serving packets will be big and then just kind of growing. We're at this point where, you know, we just want to like land and expand and all hands on deck, head down.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting. But also, you know, as you probably know, it's like every day is like Sunday scaries. So
I have a friend that we actually sponsor his team in LA, and it's a cycling team. And they're really active. They're kind of like, he would hate for me to say this, but they're older guys. They're all like, you know, but they're doing crazy things like, you know, biking from San Diego to like Malibu. Like on a Saturday. Like, I mean, they're like crazy and they're all over 50. And yeah, like maybe some of them are like in their late 40s, but they're all like probably late 40s and, you know, and up. And it's like amazing what they're able to accomplish. Like, I mean, these guys are like lawyers and doctors during the day and then they get on a bike and Hint is like, you know, we're one of their sponsors. We buy all their uniforms and stuff and they drink our water on these rides. But I would think like they would be, I mean, when you get the packets out, you should send them some because they're like, you know, they're pretty active and it's like a whole different community where I feel like people can say, God, if they can do it. And they're saying like granola butter is how I'm getting there.
exactly.
It's like, yeah. And they don't necessarily, it's interesting. Like they don't have millions of followers, but they actually have pretty good traction on like people are watching them and like, oh, I saw you guys. And they're all in like these orange like suits. And I mean, they're winning races all over the place. Yeah. So like cool. A team. Yeah. So it's pretty, it just shows you, you know, what can be done more than anything.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, super, super cool. So what's one of the biggest mistakes you think you've made along the way in sort of like building this company? I always say like, which one should I talk about right now? Like there's so many.
All right. Well, I guess, you know, while we're on the topic of press, so it was around like Thanksgiving time, you know, they sent over their big order and we had ordered this like $15,000 machine that was supposed to help us just like 10x our speed, production speed and everything. And actually, I was leaving for pretty much the first vacation I had taken since we launched. Eric and I were going down to Mexico for like Thanksgiving, with his family. And so we kind of had this like week timeline where we're like, all right, we're going to, bang out this order. And the machine comes and of course it doesn't work. And so we didn't have a backup plan, We had to kind of go back to how we were making it before, which was very like manual and a lot by hand and stuff. And so we pulled like 16, 18-hour days. We like slept in the kitchen. My family came on Thanksgiving and helped us until 2 a.m. cranking out, this last order, which in hindsight, like is going to be an awesome like family moment. But at the time it was like, me yelling at my brother for like dropping all the, like, in the moment, it's not very like warm and fuzzy. But I think that just really taught me like having a backup plan for your backup plan for your backup plan, and just always expecting something to go wrong, like we were talking earlier, and just, kind of letting it roll off your back, being flexible, which is something that I've, I'm excited to say that I've always kind of been like flexible and able to roll with the punches, but also like planning for failure is something that, because you just, I'm like optimistic. I'm like, it'll be great. Like this new machine. So,
but if you freak out and then it just like, you have to keep your cool and figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Yeah.
So we did it. I mean, we like made it, obviously. I had to go to Mexico a couple days later, but it was just, that moment was kind of like, okay, we need to, have some backups for just expecting things to go wrong.
That's great that you were able to do that. How do you and your boyfriend divide things out?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I didn't know that your husband also was super involved. But so that's been kind of an adjustment, just going from, he was working in consulting, he did tech consulting for Accenture, and so he was Monday through Friday in New York, and so I didn't see him. He was my weekend boyfriend. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I had the whole bed.
Yeah.
It was nice. And so now going from that to like, we're with each other 24/7. I mean, I think it's awesome that he kind of, we are very like compartmentalized in what we do. So I do the social media, creative, marketing, sales, and he's more technical, back end type stuff, like our website and everything, more like e-commerce. So it's nice we kind of have our own roles, but at the same time we do overlap with certain things, and just respecting each other is the biggest thing. My mom always said, like, date someone who you both look up to each other. You both kind of feel like you're getting the better end of the deal. Yeah. And I've always felt that with him. Like, I think the biggest trait in a partner is like someone who I admire and respect. And like, I just really respect him, and I'm really, proud of who he is. And so I think just having that innate, like, foundational trust is really important.
Yeah, totally. I think it's like, but it's great that you're bringing somebody in that's different though too. Like, I think, I talk about that a lot as well, that, it's not so much about like working with my husband as it is working with somebody who I totally trust and I like, and who has a different skill set. Because I think like the skill set thing is like the key thing. When I hear like two best friends from college are starting like a company and like they both do the same thing, I'm like, oh, this is going to be really tough. And again, not to say that it can't be like a little business, but whether or not it can scale to what they think it can be, you probably need somebody else in to kind of like, and it typically, like, I can almost see it now, like within a couple of years, it ends up being fine. And then it becomes, life goes on, and one decides to start a family, and then the other one is like doing all the work, and then it like really starts to divide. So I think it's great to hear that you guys are like really respectful of each other, and that there's like clear divide of sort of who does what. And like you said, that you're able to look at that person and say, I have the better end of the deal because I'm learning, and
the hardest thing is just, we never turn it off. Like, especially right now, we're just, working like so many hours that there's never like not talking about work. I remember we had like a date night recently, which was very rare. We're like, okay, we need to get out of the house. We went to dinner and we sat down, and I was like, okay, we're not going to talk about work. And it was just silent.
What do we talk about? Yeah, no, it's so true.
We love it. It's like our baby, like our passion, like that's it's what we want to talk about. But yeah.
And I think that's okay. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure on people to be like, oh, you can't have a relationship if like, you can't turn it off. But I think it's like, again, if you really enjoy what you're doing. I mean, I remember early on when we were writing the business plan for Hint, and, we had young kids too. And I'd say, oh, let's go for date night at this local place, The Grove here in San Francisco. And like, I'd have a beer, but I'd still be like writing the business plan. And like, I was like looking at my husband. He's like, this isn't really a date night. And I'm like, what? We're having a beer. Like, it's kind of a date night. Like, I'm fine with it. And he was like, okay, and it's, so it's just, I don't know what, like other people have definitions of what it's supposed to be like, but I think it's, I think it's fine. And I think also if you're really passionate about it, I mean, I think that I've seen this more and more, especially in the last year. I really think like, being an entrepreneur is sort of like solving, for the, solution, right? Like it's every day. There's like, if you can wake up and you can say like, what about this? What about this? How do we do this? Like, it's not to say that it's like smiles every single day and like, it's fun, but it's like if the challenge is there and you feel like there's still more problems to solve and you keep creating problems that then you can solve and you can keep doing that. What's wrong with like being able to talk to your boyfriend or your husband or about that? Like, what do you think about this? Like, it's just like, and again, if you respect that person for having like a different skill set than you, then there's nothing wrong with like talking about it. And so it's, we're finding like, as the Hint brand grows, it's so funny because even the times that we say, oh, let's like turn it off, then like people will see us and then they'll be like, oh my God, I want to hear about like what's going on and stuff. And so it's not even like us talking, but it's like, how do we just say, oh, I'm not talking about that right now? Because, again, sometimes you run into these people who you don't see every single day and they're just excited for you, right? And they want to hear, what's the latest and greatest. So anyway, I don't think there's any right answer about it. But so what I've heard a little bit, but what makes you unstoppable? It's our last question. So
I think what we talked about earlier, just my ability to try to channel my inner Leslie, that's my mom, and just ask the unreasonable questions and not be afraid of the answer and not be afraid to put myself out there because the worst they can say is no.
That's awesome. That's great. Very, very cool. So, well, thank you so much for coming. And this has been so great and good luck. And we'll have to have you back maybe later in the year once we hear about the progress and all the good stuff and challenges along the way. And that'd be super, super fun. So thanks again. If you like what you heard, please help spread the word and leave us a review. You can also follow along with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Kara Goldin. Do you have a question for me or want to nominate an innovator to spotlight? Please talk to me at Kara Goldin on Twitter. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, be unstoppable.